everyone. How's everyone doing today? Welcome back to the Dr. Ansley Show. Today we are going to welcome a few nutritionists from a few different universities. To start off, we're going to start off with a statistic. And according to the U.S. News from the World Health Organization, aka WHO, they looked at 31 different foodborne diseases where they're caused from bacteria, viruses, parasites, toxins, or chemicals. They found that nearly 10% of people around the world, or 600 million, get sick each year from eating contaminated foods. Of these, 420,000 die, including 125,000 children under the age of 5. Our first guest here with us tonight is Dr. Yu from Mizzou. What do you know? Welcome, Dr. Yu. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. My audience and myself have a couple questions for you. So the first question we have is, what exactly causes food poisoning?
That's a very good question. There are many bacteria in food that we see today that cause food poisoning. And those bacteria come from animals, either wild or domestic. Today we'll be focusing on salmonella because that's the most common food poisoning.
Okay.
From our data, we see that when you don't cook your food correctly, you get salmonella.
Salmonella?
Salmonella, yes. That's a very important word.
Okay. Salmonella.
Salmonella. Because when you don't cook your food correctly, the bacteria stays in your food, which trigger poisoning symptoms.
Okay. So, Dr. Yu, can you tell us how individuals know that they have food poisoning?
Yes, the food poisoning symptoms include, but not limited to, fever, which can last for 5 to 7 days, and abdominal pain, which could be treated with antibiotics. Also, watery or bloody diarrhea that you have to recover on your own. Nausea is one of them, and also vomiting.
Okay, so they can be mild to serious symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, audience, hope you don't ever have food poisoning and have mild or bloody diarrhea. And thank you for joining us, Dr. Yu.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Have a good evening. Next, we will be introducing Dr. Rui from Texas A&M on a nutritionist on eggs.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you.
Good. Dr. Rui, we have a couple questions for you that the audience has come up with. Why do eggs cause food poisoning? So today's method of producing eggs is we put lots of chickens in one facility, and then with that many birds in one place, it's really important for us to eliminate diseases. But if the scenario does happen where there is one bird that has salmonella, and there's that many eggs around in the same facility, it's common for the birds to pass the salmonella into the feces, and then with the eggs around the feces, it's not hard for the salmonella bacteria to enter that egg, and if consumers eat that product without thoroughly cooking it, they will get that bacteria as well. So if you see an egg that has any punctures or something that's not quite right, you know that that has potential to carry salmonella. In addition, consumers often think they can just wipe the outside of the eggs off and eliminate the bacteria. However, wiping the eggs off actually makes them more permeable, so the bacteria can enter the egg that way as well. Okay. All right. So what measures can the audience and consumers do to avoid food poisoning? So as any other food, the basic thing is you need to make sure you thoroughly cook your product. So anytime you're having your eggs, I know a lot of people like to have them runny, but there's a big risk for eating contaminated eggs at that point. So anytime you cook your eggs, even if you're doing boiled eggs and you notice the inside of that egg is not 100% firm, it's important for you to put those back into the water and make sure they do get to that firm stage. So by just taking the proper measures, or whenever you're cracking an egg, if you touch the outside of the shell, that's where the salmonella is often carried. So you need to make sure you thoroughly wash it before you touch any other products, because it passes that way just as well. Okay. Well, thank you to Dr. Yui for joining us. Thank you for having me. Next, I would like to introduce Dr. Evelyn from Butler University, who is a nutritionist on frozen dinners. Audience, please welcome Dr. Evelyn. Good evening, Dr. Evelyn.
Good evening.
How are you doing today?
Good.
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 So I myself and the audience have a couple questions we'd like to ask you.
Okay.
The first one that I have is, I have heard about an E. coli problem. with frozen dinners. Is this true problem or simply just a tall tale?
I mean, is it a tall tale? There has been E. coli strains found in certain products, 27 products in 15 different states. It doesn't seem like a lot when you think about it, but still a lot of people are hurt. There has been 2 specific ones that had a kidney problem, so I had to go to the hospital. No deaths were, I guess, happened from those, but it was still something that sent somebody to the hospital. People say 27 people, no big deal, but it's still something to look at.
Okay. And the other question myself and the audience had was, after we had heard about the E. coli problem with frozen dinners, are they ready-to-cook meals really ready to cook?
Well, the ready-to-cook meals, there has been problems with, in even recent past, with salmonella and E. coli. The problem is that the manufacturer isn't necessarily cooking them to the full extent to get them ready to cook. So, yes, they are ready to cook, but they have to make sure they cook them long enough to make sure that everything is killed off in the product itself, rather than just assuming, oh, it's somewhat done, you can eat it. It's not.
It's not truly done.
Yes.
Okay. Well, audience, please help me in thanking Dr. Evelyn in joining us today. Nice to meet you and talk with you. Unfortunately, Dr. Alyssa could not join us due to 8 tiny reindeer that mysteriously appeared on the runway, causing her flight to be canceled. However, we are fortunate enough to have her Skype in. Welcome, Dr. Alyssa. How are you doing today?
Hi, Sydney. I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me on the show.
So Dr. Alyssa, tell me why green beans cause food poisoning.
Okay, first of all, it's very unlikely to get food poisoning from green beans. But there have been cases where people have gotten sick from eating too many raw beans because green beans have a natural toxin called lectins, but those can be cooked out. So to avoid getting food poisoning from green beans, you should always wash the green beans and then cook them in boiling water. There have also been cases where people have gotten sick from improper canning procedures, but that has nothing to do with the green beans themselves.
So Dr. Alyssa, on the other hand, tell me why spinach causes food poisoning.
Well, recently spinach has been causing a lot of problems because bacteria like E. coli can be found inside the leaves. You can wash the outside, obviously, but it's really hard to wash the inside, so it's hard to tell if the spinach is contaminated. But scientists have been developing ways to clean the inside. They're a little costly, though, so they're working on that. But you really shouldn't worry about getting food poisoning from spinach because it's definitely one of the healthiest leafy greens out there.
Thank you, Doctor, for Skyping in with us. Our audience really appreciates learning about green beans and spinach food poisoning.
All right, well, thanks for having me on the show, and I hope everyone learned a little something. Bye.
Our last nutritionist is from the University of Kentucky, and his name is Dr. Finney. Audience, please help me in welcoming Dr. Finney. Good evening, Dr. Finney.
Good evening.
How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing pretty good.
Past your bedtime?
Almost done.
So my audience and myself have a couple questions to ask you about ice cubes, of course, since you're a nutritionist on that. The first question we have is, how is it possible to get food poisoning from ice?
Food poisoning from ice cubes is not common, but it is possible to get. Most of the time, it comes from people getting ice from ice machines, and sanitation is really overlooked. It's not something people always think about. You have to think of ice cubes like any other food. So if it comes into contact with bacteria, you run the risk of it getting that bacteria and ultimately getting you, making you sick. Most of the time, the bacteria comes from mineral buildup, and that's something you're not always looking at in an ice machine either, so it can get you sick.
Okay. So what can you do to avoid the food poisoning from the ice?
Basically, you can avoid it by maintenance and sanitation. You do this by cleaning out your ice machine maybe every 6 months or so, and if you have an ice filter, about every 6 months too. You know, keeping ice frozen is a big thing too, because melted ice is more likely to contract bacteria than frozen ice, so keeping your ice frozen is the best way. And, you know, you can take all these precautions, but sometimes it's unfortunate and you end up getting sick, but not likely.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Finney, for coming and visiting with us. Audience, please thank Dr. Finney. Now that you have heard from the previous nutritionists, we would like to take a poll for our viewers. Please join me in the polling room and cast your votes now. During our break, the nutritionists had time to come up with a conclusion in which food they thought was more susceptible to food poisoning. Nutritionists, what do you have to conclude?
We concluded that eggs are most likely going to be the cause of food poisoning if someone gets it. Like in my case, I know about ice and food poisoning, and those cases are so few and far between that it's really not something you have to worry about, and it mostly goes back to sanitation. So, you know, sanitation can be helped. That's something that should be maintained, so it's not very likely.
I'm going to agree with you on that, Dr. Finney, as well as frozen foods are a problem that we see 27 in 15 states. That is a extremely small number. It's not really anything big that people need to necessarily never eat another frozen food in their life, but it's something to look at. So I will agree that eggs are something that we do need to watch out for.
So unlike the 27 cases, it actually was reported that 142,000 cases were reported. So I feel like just because we live in such a fast-paced world and eggs are such a staple item, whether it's in bakeries or whether you're eating them at a hotel, there's just so many sources of eggs that if you don't take the time to properly cook them, then it's very likely you will get food poisoning from eggs. Thank you for your conclusion, doctors and nutritionists. So audience, stay away from Aunt Carol's deviled eggs. Thank you and join us next week.